I think that's a great question, and it might be hard for some owners who are listening to this, but I think we can dive into like the things that we look for in the business, like the ones that we really weight the most. Um, so like always contractor recurring revenue, right? That's like one of the holy grails of this search fund model. If you somehow can pivot from the project base to more of like a service or maintenance or recurring revenue, in especially if you can get contracts for that, I mean that'll increase the value a lot, just because, and the reason why is that because it gives you that predictability, right? And that's something that investors want to look is how predictable the business is. And like these days, I think most people are understanding on contracts. I mean, you get contracts for everything these days. Even your Netflix or Disney, you sign a contract. So that shouldn't be something that is going to bother your customers, especially if you have a really loyal customer base. And talking about customers, it's the customer concentration. Like if you can diversify your customer base, that's one thing. And contracts, recurring revenue, diversifying your customer base, and if you really focus on your service and pay attention to your customers, you're going to reduce your churn. So we normally look at churn numbers, net retention rate. What else am I forgetting there?
Yeah, I think just adding on to that is the churn pieces. In other words, is if you have customer last year, are they coming back to you this year? And then are they going to come back to you next year, and so forth and so on. I think generally, if the pricing is fair, the service is good, and they feel that it's valuable, that customers stay, and they'll continue to stay. And I think it all comes back down to this word you mentioned earlier, which is predictability and resilience. And then I also think about how to make that happen. Is it just by the owner of the company, or are there other people in the company, in the organization, that are helping out the leadership? So if it's the owner doing everything in the business, they have all the relationships, the customers do business with the company because they know the owner personally and they've been friends for 20, 30, 40 years, I would argue that is less resilient, because if you take that owner out of the business, then the question is, will the business continue doing what it's doing? Will it continue to grow as well? So having, like a sales leader or a chief technical officer, or just general help, like what does the help around that owner look like, and can the business still run without that owner in place? That's a sign of resiliency.
Yeah, that's a great point, George, because it's the middle management, and we see a lot of cases where the owner is wearing multiple hats, right? And that's why the margins might be good, but then once you start asking what's your day-to-day look like, what roles do you normally play, you start figuring out, oh, the owner does sales, the owner does HR, it does payroll, it does invoicing, it does so many things, and that's why they don't have basically time for anything. And when you start doing your modeling when you put your investor hat, is like, how many people do I need to hire to replace the owner, right? So if you start building that middle management layer, not only strengthens the predictability, but it's something that investors like to see, and that could potentially result in a multiple arbitrage as well.
That comment just reminded me of that owner I talked to today, where the father bought the business, now the son took over. We had a good laugh at it, laugh about this, and we laughed because it's true. And we were kind of talking about what a potential collaboration between us could look like. And I joked with him in a joke/serious that I would have to hire 3 people to replace him, because he does sales, he does final QA of his technical product before it reaches the customer, and he's involved day to day in the technical analysis of the service that they provide. So that's 3 separate jobs or roles that one person is handling right there. And it just so happens that he's been in the company for 30 years. He's the business owner. So yeah, we both got a laugh that it would take 3+ people to replace him, and that's the reality. That is when you swap out an owner that's been a technically inclined owner that's been running the business for 20 or 30 years, to ask anybody new to to step in and take over that role is a challenge. And it will likely need to be multiple people that fill that gap, and that ends up being, you know, hundreds of thousands of additional salary that wasn't in the business before, which could have an impact to the profitability of the business.
Yeah. And another advice is invest in marketing and sales, because another thing that investors like to see is the growth of the business, because we like to ride on the momentum, and having a sales and marketing team, I mean, that adds a lot of value as well. I think you should definitely keep separate the company expenses from your personal expenses, because it gets really hard to differentiate once you're doing diligence, which ones are company costs or expenses and which ones are personal. Because it's one thing when you have it all under one bucket, maybe you have it under travel, maybe you have it under, you know, entertainment, and like how do we know which one are actually, what percentage of that is the company, what percentage of that is the company. I mean, we're good and like, okay, we trust our partners and we see, okay, how much of that is actually family versus company, and then we adjust for that on the valuation. But if you can have those separate, it will be a lot easier and more streamlined process for a potential buyer.
Yeah, I think about systems that could or should be in place. So if accounting is done on Excel, consider getting onto something at least as technical as QuickBooks. And then if you're on QuickBooks and your company's big enough, consider going up the next step up, something bigger like a NetSuite or Microsoft. There's a lot of options out there in terms of ERPs or accounting systems that are out there. And then operations would be documented processes. I think oftentimes when people work in businesses for years, if not decades, it's just second nature or becomes muscle memory for the people performing those jobs. And if they're performing the tasks repeatedly, then that can become a documented process.
Yeah.
So having those processes documented somewhere, so that in case the person needs to go work on something else, if they leave the company, if a new person joins, at least the SOP, the standard operating procedure, can be referred back to for ensuring quality, and then also ensuring that training is done properly.
Yeah, I think actually this answers part of the previous question as well, like how they can improve the value of the company, having processes in place, because that reduces the key man risk as well.
Always going with the highest bidder.
Yeah, I think when it's not only the total enterprise value when you receive an offer. You need to look at this. You need to look at what the structure looks like. What if you have some contingent seller note or seller note or earn out? Like look at the terms. It's not all about like the number. It's about like it's more about if you can achieve those numbers, how you're going to be paid, and then if you care about your brand, your reputation, the legacy, your employees, that also should play some weightage on your decision. And I mean, I think we've seen two scenarios where the owner is, they're pretty reserved. The company doesn't know they're going on a process, and we've seen some others who are pretty open, and the employees know that they're going in the process. I don't think there's a right answer there. I think I always think transparency is always the best way to go. What other mistakes have we seen preparing the business for sale? Maybe not being fully committed to the process, and like what that will, like how much, like understanding and being mindful that this is not going to be an easy process to go through. It's going to be a long process. There's going to be a lot of things involved, a lot of emotional roller coasters going. Because as investors go in and look at your business, they're gonna look all over the place, under the mattress, under the rugs. So it might be challenging for some people to go through this process, and just maybe just really, if you're going to do it, you need to very much understand how hard is it to go through this process, actually.
Yeah, it definitely could be challenging, especially if you've been in the business for a long time. There's, again, that emotional connection to the business. Having somebody kind of come in and take a look around and around all the corners can feel sometimes like an invasion of privacy. So I think that's something that we're mindful of, is to really approach it with some sensitivity and some grace to make sure that all parties are comfortable as we go through the process. As you were saying, like the commitment piece, I was reminded of an owner where the owner was really excited, and it took us a little bit to figure out the total ownership structure, and there was other owners involved in the business, and not everybody was either aware or on board that these conversations were having. So we would make progress with the majority owner. They were really excited, and then we later found out that the minority owner wasn't completely on board yet, so that can make things a little tricky.
Yeah.
So really making sure that if you have the majority decision-making power, that you're ready to exercise that decision-making power and potentially override your partners. Or I think the preference for us would be all the partners, the ownership group, is aware and aligned that a sale is going to be explored before we start engaging deeply.
Yeah. I think another mistake is choosing your attorney. Because we've seen owners who normally go to the regular attorney, and it's like medicine, right? You have different type of doctors. You have doctors that specialize in heart, doctors that specialize on pediatrics, and same as with attorneys. There's some attorneys that specialize on contracts, lawyers that specializes in M&A. So I totally encourage owners to seek an M&A advisor or an M&A attorney, because it will smooth things out for sure.